So Jamie, so we're all clear, the purpose of this meeting is,
essentially to conduct to discuss the return to play requirements for a student.
okay,
You know, that's unfortunate, a real unproven ground since we're kind of on unproven waters right now as it is. So I guess we're really going to have to see what national standards are going to be so we can kind of keep in line. But it's going to be hard to set down guidelines when we really don't know what's going to be happening here. There's so many intricacies that go on with this COVID-19 situation. So, you know, we can already see what's happening in professional baseball. There's a lot of it's being shut down. And then on the other hand, you know, basketball seems to be doing fairly good. There's all those enclosed areas, but it seems like the professional sports after 2 weeks or two tests positive or whatever, they seem to be getting back to playing. So, you know, there's just no grounds at this point in time. So it's going to be difficult.
well, Jamie, my question is this really an area of establishing guidelines and following what's been presented? What's been presented is basically an algorithm for medical practice. And I'm not sure that we need to be in that realm. I mean, if we made the statement that a person who had tested positive or an athlete or a student who had tested positive for the virus to return to play needed clearance from their treating physician. I think that's the guideline we should present. I think to get off into whether he's less than 12 or over than 12, we're not in the business of practicing medicine. We're in the business of setting guidelines for the local school districts to manage their athletes.
Seems to me our statement should be, if they're cleared by their physician, it seems to me that if a COVID positive athlete, if a patient's been identified as COVID positive, they need permission from their physician to return to sports, just like any other condition.
Yes, I think that's exactly right.
And,
I agree.
Yeah, and if somebody has post-COVID cardiomyopathy, et cetera, to the extent that they're symptomatic, that patient can't come back to play. Or if they have residual lung damage, they can't come back to play because they're going to be dyspneic. So it seems to me we have to leave it up to the patient's physician. In terms of the return, if they're asymptomatic and they get cleared, it seems to me a broader issue is, are they still infectious? And the CDC guidelines say they don't need a negative COVID test if they're afebrile for 24 hours and they're asymptomatic for 10 days. So those are the CDC guidelines. And I think with those two sets of standards, that's what the MAC should say.
Yeah, I tend to agree also with what Jesse said. I think that we shouldn't be in the business of telling the physicians what they need to do to clear them. They should just be referred to their primary care provider or their physician, and they should clear them depending on what the guidelines are at the time, because they may change. And we can't be constantly updating that. I think it's going to be a really difficult to even have high school sports or school sports if the pro sports are having a really tough time continuing to play because of COVID positive patients, and they have unlimited resources and medical personnel to evaluate and treat their players, and they get COVID testing on a daily basis. I can't imagine how that's going to be able to work in schools where kids may go days before they realize to have COVID. And in the meantime, they've spread it to multiple other teammates and classmates.
Yeah, I agree totally. You know, unfortunately, the school districts are having a heck of a time right now trying to hone down on the regulations and everything. But, you know, the local governmental bodies, school boards, et cetera, you know, they're fully aware of a lot of these things and really are trying to pull things together. But once again, it's a moving target. So, and I agree with Jesse. I don't think that we're going to be in it for the medical aspect of it. You know, we have to be in it for the UIL prospect of it. So.
I want to go on record and say that we have a lot of school districts that are going to be virtual learning for 4 to 8 weeks, but we're going to have athletics and contact athletics and football and volleyball, and then not so contact and cross country and team tennis. And I'm at a crossroads of how we can justify having contact sports but no in-person classroom.
So I'll make a comment to that. I'll first respond to the rest of you guys. I appreciate your comments and fully expected this is where we land from the physician standpoint, that, you know, we would have the student cleared by a medical physician. So thank you, and thank you for your understanding of what a difficult and moving target, Dr. T, as you described this is. Hondo, to your comments, I will tell you this has been discussed at length amongst state leadership and amongst the members of the medical community who are advising state leadership. And I get that what you just said is something that comes to people's minds very quickly, and it's very easy to say. But if you look at it in a more in-depth way, I think you may land on a different answer. You know, pick a school, for a high school that's got 1,000 kids in it, bringing 1,000 kids indoors for 8 hours with the entire high school staff. You have to feed those kids breakfast, feed those kids lunch. They change classes. You have to get them to school, which oftentimes involves school busing. And they're indoors for the vast majority of that 8 hours, breathing recycled air. That is a whole set of challenges that is really overwhelming. When you think about, again, if we're talking about a 4A school, bringing 60, 70, 80 kids to an outdoor football practice for 2 hours, or 20 volleyball girls with 2 coaches in a gym for an hour and a half or 2 hours, with the risk mitigation guidelines that we've released, that still presents challenges, but it's nowhere nearly as challenging as the larger project of bringing the entire school community together for an entire day. And so, you know, where we've landed is UIL doesn't justify that. That's a decision for the local school board and local school leadership. And if they don't feel like they can justify it, then they don't have those sports. That's a decision they make, not a decision that we make for them. And we also have to also recognize that not every area of the state is facing the same challenges that are presented by COVID-19. I mean, there are still counties. It's a small number. My last check was a day or two ago. It was only 4, but there are 4 counties who don't have any cases. There are counties who qualify for the exemption from the governor's face coverings order. It's still strongly recommended that they follow it, but they're not required to follow it because they have less than 20 cases. So the idea that everyone is facing the same challenges at the same time is just not accurate. And the idea that bringing a smaller subset of students together in a particular way in far less spaces with far less staff for far less time is the same as bringing a vast majority or a vastly larger group of kids and faculty together for a much, much longer period of time over many, many more spaces that involve many, many more transitions. That's just not peeling through the layers of what we're dealing with in schools right now.
Yeah, well, I'm all about bringing back football and sports, and I know we are in uncharted waters that no one's ever been through before, and but it's perplexing because we have schools that I've been going to and visiting in West Texas, and they're trying to social distance in their summer strength and conditioning, But you get 6 of the kids get out of the same car without face mask on, and then they go out on the field to social distance.
Yeah, but Hondo, you have to remember what our charge is. We often walk a fine line between the practice of medicine, the providing of local health care, and what our real charge is, and that is to give guidelines to the local school districts of what they do if they decide to do virtual school, or if they decide to do sports. In our arena is sports, and that's what we need to do. We certainly cannot control whether kids go off to lunch break at a hamburger joint and don't have a mask on. That's not our charge.
I agree with you.
Dr. DeLee, what we do know is that while kids are going to do that, and we've all seen it, when they do come and meet with their coaches and their band directors and those adults that have a real impact on them and a real impact on their behavior, they at least have the opportunity to have someone outside of their mom or dad impress upon them the dangers of this virus and the social responsibility that they should all be practicing when it comes to mitigating the risk of it. Doesn't mean that those efforts are going to have a perfect result. They're clearly not.
No,
kids are still kids.
But
We do at least have kids, we do have coaches having an opportunity to at least try to impact that behavior and also provide them an opportunity in the athletics world in particular, an opportunity to conduct these where professional educators are setting up the risk mitigation guidelines, as opposed to the same kids in the same sports in the same counties in the same town walking across the street and playing the exact same sport, just with a club uniform on instead of doing it at school. So there's a whole lot of complexities to this conversation that most people won't get into, and most people don't care to, frankly. It's easier just to say, how can we do this if we're not doing that? But when you really get into deep discussions with educators and with state leaders, you find out that there's a real need for this and a way to do it that hopefully will have a positive impact on mitigating spread instead of what people are assuming it's going to have, and that it's a very negative impact on the spread.
Yep. And again, our charge is to give those coaches and teachers and people in the supervisory role tools that they need to do this safely. That's our job.
Yeah, this is going to be a work in progress. Unfortunately, there's going to be trial and error, and there's going to be some problems, and there's not going to be some problems because we've got so many different size school districts. But that's kind of where we're really relying on our Board of Education for each individual school districts to do the right thing. And I'm sure they're going to be studying the federal guidelines, the state guidelines, the county guidelines. I mean, there's so many guidelines now to go through. I don't think that they're going to be able to hopefully sort some of that out. But, right now for us to set down guidelines to go by, I think that's just not going to be really an appropriate thing to do because it's a moving target once again.
Can someone make a motion of how we handle this? I mean, if we're going to require them to be released by their treating physician, then we make such a motion.
I do have a question though. I had actually in my district didn't have any kids, but I did have a coach, and they didn't have a formal consultation. They went through a drive-through testing, and they get an email with a little thing that said they were positive, and there's no directives on it. And then they're contacted by Tarrant County Public Health, but there was no formal telehealth, virtual, there was no in-person. For something like that, if we get that and I get that positive note or email or whatever, am I sending them to a physician to then be cleared? Or are we just going through the guidelines for return to play that the public health department gave them as far as isolation?
So in that scenario, the CDC, for an otherwise healthy person, the CDC doesn't require a negative COVID test. So some of this is education for the ISD.
Right.
They need to be cleared by their physician, just like return to work guidelines from the CDC say they need people who are COVID positive need to return to work from their physician.
Okay.
People can return, people can leave quarantine after 10 days of improving symptoms and negative fever. But the notion of having a negative COVID test was from the CDC was revised maybe a couple of weeks ago. So people who are going through these drive-throughs and paying to get a COVID test are not doing what the CDC is recommending. They need to go see their physician.
Okay.
So getting back to Jesse's question, Jamie, can you restate what our charge is today, the purpose of our meeting, and then I'd be willing to offer a motion.
The purpose is simply to discuss what, if any, return to play requirements we want for a student athlete. We also need to talk about whether or not this would apply to a student in marching band at post-recovery.
So my motion would be patients who have been identified as COVID positive need to be cleared by their physician before they can return to their said activity.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
All in favor? Let's go this way. Let's say anybody opposed to that motion. Okay, then the motion passes.
You know, next question I have is what if the player's parent is positive of COVID in the family?
That
I mean,
person needs to be
we better
quarantined.
keep.
CDC
Yeah,
guidelines
CDC
say that person needs to be tested and quarantined for 10 days before they can return. So some of these questions have to be referred back to the CDC. I mean, at some point, people have to trust what the CDC is saying is the truth, in spite of its criticisms. The CDC is still the last word. I mean, there's a lot of good scientists at the CDC.
I agree.
And just
Jamie?
a point of clarification, that would include cheer as well. I know we said marching band, but
He said all students, all participants.
great.
I think that's the way the motion should state, is all participants. Jamie, do you have anything else?
No, sir. That is perfect. I'm happy to take any comments from committee members about this specific topic or the broader topic of COVID-19 and answer any questions you guys may have.
I have two questions. Number one, I want to know if on this Zoom meeting, if Arnie's background is a painting.
Well, it's got moving water.
I told Jamie I'm in Colorado and Denver right now, but I didn't tell the truth. I'm in the Bahamas. No, I'm just kidding.
It's not a painting. You're really there. And secondly, if you think our job is hard, can you imagine the teachers keeping an 8-year-old in a mask for 8 hours?
Oh boy, yeah, that's going to be something.
That's going to be something.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Thank
something.
you all. Thank you
Before-
all very much.
Can
All
I say
right,
something?
thank you very much.
Can I
See
say
y'all
something
later.
can I make an interjection before we're through?
Yes.
I think it would be imperative that as soon as this is formulated and finished, that this information gets disseminated as quickly as possible to the local school districts, because they are all searching for answers and are desperate for every kind of help that we can give them.
Moving target.
Yes, sir.
Jamie, what's the time frame for that?
It's 7:27 right now.
Yes.
I mean, I'm hoping we'll have that out by close of business today, close of business Monday at the latest.
All right.
Great.
Well, thank you all for this, everybody coming to this urgent meeting. And if we have no more business, the meeting is adjourned.